and we can make this happen. We've got what I believe to be like a really awesome presentation today. I first just want to start by just kind of centering us around the work and what the work looks like for us, the reason why we gather. And so, we are really committed to the Elevate Tech Ed ambassadors. We're really committed to thinking about how we're improving education through the P20 pipeline and thinking about recruiting and retaining teachers. So our ambassadors are committed to sharing and promoting research that and making that research more accessible to practitioners and K-12 teachers. We also are really aware of representing our respective institutions and working together to curate micro content and focus on applying our current research to relevant issues that are in the field. And so with that said, I'm really excited to bring a special speaker today, Dr. Staci Zolkowski. And thanks for coming and being with us today. Staci's from University of Texas at Tyler, and she has done a great deal of work around the brain and stress, social emotional awareness, and resilience, which I can't think of a better topic to talk through right now as we think about teachers in these really trying times, and what we can do to not only recruit teachers in this challenging time, but also retain teachers that are currently working in the field. So with that being said, thank you very much, Staci, for coming and being a part of the work. We cannot wait to hear what you've got to share today.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And I'm just going to apologize now. The FedEx guy is supposed to come and my husband is not here. And I have a dog who likes to protect us from the FedEx man. So I'm just going to apologize now. And hopefully the FedEx man won't show up and then it'll all be fine. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can y'all see my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So then I will start the slides. So I always like to start out by talking a little bit about who I am. To start, I love working at UT Tyler. I love being, working with future and current teachers, but more than anything, I'm basically obsessed with my family. My son, Colton, is 12. He is in the 7th grade. He loves all things sports, jujitsu, and he's into cross country and football and basketball and all things. My daughter Zoe does jujitsu as well. I like to describe her as being, my rainbow and sunshine and just all things goodness girl who has music in her heart. They're so much fun. She's in 5th grade and is 11. And, prior to, and my husband, of course, I can't forget him. Sorry, Sean. Don't tell him. I couldn't do any of this without him. He's an awesome, awesome partner and supporter of everything that I do. Prior to working at UT Tyler, I was general education teacher. I taught kindergarten and 4th grade and all inclusion based. And I'm actually originally from Ohio, and in Ohio, you're required to get your master's degree within a certain amount of time. So I always knew when I moved to Texas that getting my master's degree was something that I would do. And I just wasn't sure what I wanted to get my master's degree in. After working with kids with challenging behaviors and special needs, I decided to get my master's degree in special education, emphasizing in behavior disorders. I then went on to get my PhD in special education, emphasizing in behavior disorders. And through all my millions of pages, it felt like, of readings and all the things, the statistics on kids with behavior disorders are just terrible. And it's like, okay, well, we know those statistics, but how can we help? And that's where my research agenda was actually formed, in looking at the area of resilience. It's like, okay, well, we have this going on. We know that these kids are typically not successful, but let's look at the kids that are successful and figure out how we can help. And so I've always been kind of that glass half full kind of a person anyways. And so I want, everything that I do is how can I help, what's the why and whatnot. And part of that is social emotional learning, and getting to work with school districts in the East Texas area on implementing social emotional learning curriculum, and supporting our students and supporting our teachers really does foster and promote resilience. So that's a little bit about me. And so we will, today, we are going to be talking about, starting out talking about just, getting our basic needs met, stress, brain, and how it all works together, looking at statistics on mental health, but then moving to that, well, how can I help? And looking at social emotional learning, social emotional awareness. And I want to talk to you all about things that I do with my students, and helping my students to be successful. So when I think about social emotional, moving on. So everything, one of the classes I teach is on classroom management. And we, when I talk to my students, before we really get into really managing a class, I talk to them about, the why of behavior. Why do behaviors happen in the first place? And once we figure out the why, we can figure out how to help the kid. And so part of that why is looking at the basics. Are my students getting their basic needs met? Do they have food? Do they feel safe? Do they feel like they belong? And to be honest, at the collegiate level, I'd say the same thing is true. I need to assess my students. Are my students getting their basic needs met? Do they feel safe? Do they feel like they belong? We can't get to the learning piece if we aren't getting our basic needs met. So to me, everything starts with this. And then I like to think about brain development and brain growth. And this is fascinating to me, looking at MRIs and seeing the brain development from, really from birth all the way through when your brain is fully developed. And really in adolescence, I talk to my students, and we have to remember this too, especially for those of us that are teaching students that are more, 18, 19 years old, that their brains are not fully developed. Their frontal lobe isn't fully developed. So we need to, I always say, when you do something, you make a poor choice, just tell your parents that your frontal lobe isn't fully developed. And I see this with my own kids, especially my son, where I'm just like, I'll tell him, I'm like, I really need you to just make your whole brain and what you have function, because I need you to focus, or whatever the case might be. And so it's so interesting to me to be talking to my own students about their students and brain growth and brain development, so they can start to understand some whys to behavior and the whys of kids and why they act like they do. And I'm seeing it before my eyes. And so it's just really funny to me. We talk about that all the time at my house. doesn't want to, there we go. So when we think about brain development, and I had neglected to say in the slide before, adolescence, and we're looking at adolescence being really 10 to 12 all the way up through young adulthood. Some would classify that being into the 18 years of age bracket. And there's more brain development that occurs than any other time other than when we're babies. So we have all these things happening, and we're wondering, our brain is growing, are we getting our basic needs met? And then we have to think about stress and the impact that stress has on the brain. When kids or adults, when we're scared, there's a stress hormone that is released, and it's cortisol, and too much of it can be harmful. Some levels of stress, they're normal. We all have stressful moments. We all have those periods of time. But stress can negatively impact us. It can impact our health. It can impact our emotional well-being. It can have an impact on anxiety and depression. So I think about, Maslow's hierarchy of need. Are we getting our basic needs met? If we're not, then we're more likely to be stressed, which impacts our brain. I think about the pandemic that we're going through right now and everything that entails, and some of what our students are going through. I had one of my students, or not one, but my students, one of the projects that they do, there's talking about, create a meet the teacher poster, and he created a PowerPoint presentation, and his senior year of high school was the beginning of the pandemic. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that didn't even occur to me, thinking about the fact that many of our students, they had not, technically for him, this year that we're in right now is a normal year. And I put that in air quotes because it's truly not normal, but we're functioning like it is normal. And they don't know how to maneuver and how to adapt. And I see what stress can do to my college students and the decisions that they make because of the stress that they're under. And, whether it be not completing assignments or, or just not coming to class, or I've had students, because of so much stress, cheat on assignments, have to take my class over again. And there's the gamut there, and they're good students, but stress plays stress plays a role in that. When you think about stress and look into more detail on it and what it's doing to the brain, it makes more sense. Looking globally at the mental health issues that we have going on right now, globally, mental health conditions are a huge problem, and it's really at all ages, but it's really becoming a critical issue in adolescence. 1 in 7 adolescents experience one type of mental health condition in 2019. We're looking at 175 million adolescents being impacted. That is mind-blowing to me. And so this has actually been a 4 million increase in students since the year 2000. And so I'm looking at this more globally, but when we break it down into US statistics, we're looking at our adolescents with suffering from anxiety. 38% of our adolescents are suffering from anxiety, 26% of males, and then the 38% of females. To me, this feels really high, and the numbers, increase as we get older. When we look at major depressive episode, this graph to me is really interesting because it's blocking one, it shows 2016 through 2019, but it's also showing you by age. and notice what happens with our students that are 12 to 17, or even our students that are 18 to 25. I don't know about you, but I do have some of your atypical students in my classroom, and they would fall into the, really into, well, actually all of these brackets. But just looking at the increase in depression, and thinking about what that is impacting the students that we have in our classroom, and it is impacting the students that our students have in their classrooms. When we continue to look at depression with, when we classify it with severe impairment means that it is negatively impacting a person's life for 2 weeks or more. So they don't do their normal activities that they would normally do, or they, in our instance, they might stop coming to class or stop doing their assignments, maybe stop doing different activities that they would normally do. And again, looking at this breakdown of our males to females, and then how much that is increasing by year, and looking at the different age ranges. So it's clear that we have a problem. And again, I always look at it as but how can I help? Another thing, I promise it's going to get better in just a second. I'm almost done with all the bad stuff. So suicide rates among our youth are also have also greatly increased. Suicide is actually the second leading cause of death in adolescents. First leading cause of death in adolescence is unintentional injury, but that has traffic accidents, drug overdose, and drowning, I believe, is the other one. Don't quote me on that, but they have 3 of them that I just lost it in my brain. But they are, the unintentional injury is blocked together, and then the second leading cause of death is suicide. And suicide is actually in the top 10 leading deaths for all age ranges. So again, what can we do? How can we help? We need to make a change. And I read today, I actually printed it off, that the U.S. Surgeon General warns that the mental health crisis among young people is worsening, and it's worsening. Of course, the pandemic has had a major impact, and it's in the U.S. ER visits for suicide attempts has risen 51% for adolescent girls in early 2021 as compared to the same period in 2019. 51% increase. That's insane to me. And looking at a 4% increase for boys. So, okay, we have the idea of stress and what stress can do when we think about Maslow's hierarchy of need. Are we getting our basic needs met? We look at brain development and the impact that has on our students. We also look at stress and what that has to do. And thinking about this now is even bigger because of everything that everyone is dealing with a pandemic. And so we have stress, we have mental health conditions, and then many of our those who have mental health conditions are not seeking treatment, which is another huge problem, because then those problems continue into adulthood. And then we have adults who are not able to necessarily manage these things, and they're having kids who are then learning the same kinds of things. It's this vicious cycle. So we've got to figure out how we can help. What can we do? And that is it. Really all of this kind of in lines with my research but how can I help? Okay, I get the why, but what am I going to do? And how can I help those around me? So that's where hope comes in, right? It empowers us and it enables us to help others. And will never leave our side. We always know that we will have hope. So my definition of resilience is when a person is successful despite the adversities that they may have in their life. And, I would argue that just because you've had, a trajectory for a certain amount of time, I think that even an adult can have, resilience can be fostered and they can be successful. I don't think that there's any age that you're like, oh, well, you're doomed, I don't think anybody is doomed. I think it's finding those ways in how we can help. And so I really, really am intentional in working with my students and supporting them and hopefully fostering, being a protective factor for those students and working with them so that I can promote resilience in all of my students, especially the ones that are really struggling. Well, social emotional learning is one aspect of that, how I can help. I can promote social emotional awareness. I do that with my students. This is another piece that I talk in detail about, and I try and model with how I run my classes. And I like this figure. Well, I love a good chart, but I like this figure because it's looking at how social emotional learning is broken down. And then it shows you the classroom, the school, the home, and the community. From my research lens, I like Bronfenbrenner, looking at how it starts with who you are, your inner self, but then it stems out from your home, your peers, your class, and your community, and how they're all intertwined and working together to create who you are. And I will say that through my research in resilience, that the one thing that has kind of always kind of comes out is that the ones that the students or the individuals I worked with that I've interviewed, they have this innate sense of self, that they're not going to give up despite whatever's going on. They are not going to give up. Another aspect is having caring relationships, specifically with teachers, and having a positive learning environment. So social emotional learning really encompasses those things because and when I'm promoting social emotional awareness in my classroom, then I am showcasing to my students, I'm showing them that I care. I'm having that positive relationship with my students. And I'm also showing them how they can find that innate sense of self. When we break down social emotional awareness, we're looking at self-awareness and self-management. So to me, they are different because self-awareness is I need to be aware of my feelings. It's just basically being aware of what's going on inside of me. And then now that I'm aware, sometimes we can be aware, but we cannot manage it. So we've got to get to, okay, well, now I'm aware, and I also know how to manage it. I feel like, a lot of times we tell kids, oh, you can't be mad or don't be sad, suck it up, buttercup. And really, that's not what our language should be. Our language should be is, it's okay to be mad. It's okay to be sad. It's how we manage the mad or how we manage the sad that really makes an impact and a difference. So you can be mad, but I don't want you to throw that book. That's not appropriate. Let's think about what you can do. So teaching being aware of our feelings, but then learning how to manage them. But then we also need to be aware of other people's feelings and other people's perspectives. It's not just about us, right? We've got to figure out how we can work with other people. And that helps us with our relationship skills and working with other people, because no matter what we want to do and how introverted we are, or how much we don't like working with other people, that is just a fact of life. We have to work with others, even when we go to the grocery store. And then, of course, that ultimately leads to those responsible decision-making skills. And if you think about that, it also goes in tandem with the brain development. And so we just assume, oh, well, everybody knows these things. Not everybody knows these things. We have to teach it to our students, because when we think back about looking at Maslow's hierarchy of need and stress and anxiety, depression, mental health conditions, thinking about thoughts of suicide, if we are adults having those feelings, we're not able to teach our kids. So we as educators can step in and be that positive influence for our students. The impact of social emotional learning is, and utilizing this with our students it's huge. The meta-analysis done shows that up to 18 years later, we are seeing positive social behaviors and attitudes, empathy and teamwork, increase academics. In some reports, you'll see an 11% increase in academics by utilizing social emotional learning curriculum. So anytime I'm working with a district, because we feel like, especially now when we have so many kids that have lost so much instruction, we think we have to get to drill, and shove all the curriculum in our students' brains. But really, we have to educate the whole child. We have to get to, and this is what I talk to my students about, you cannot get to the academics without addressing everything else. And social emotional learning can help us to address those things, so that our brain can get to the academics. An 11% increase in academics, that's a whole letter grade. You have fewer conduct problems, less emotional distress, and lower drug use. When I talk to my students about social emotional learning, I talk to them about, okay, it's stressful being an educator. When you're working with kids, they're coming from all walks of life. You're expected to do all these different things. It's so stressful. But when we are promoting a positive learning environment, we're promoting social emotional learning, social emotional awareness, then we're creating a positive environment that we as the educator want to be in, and so do our students. It's very important. And then looking at lifetime outcomes of promoting social emotional learning, you have a decreased likelihood of living or being in public housing, receiving public assistance, any involvement with police, or ever being in a detention facility. So these are all fantastic things that we can teach our educators to do in their classrooms, so that and I've even had working with teachers say, it made a difference for me too. It wasn't just my students that were impacted, it was me. Or a high school chemistry teacher who was ready to leave. This was a couple of years ago. He was ready to leave teaching just with the students that he had. And he started implementing social emotional learning curriculum into his classroom, and it changed everything. His test scores dramatically increased. So he was, that real life, like, oh, you were telling the truth in implementing, and it was a game changer for him. So really, it's like, okay, when I'm working with my students, I can talk to them about all these things that I just talked to you about. I can talk to them about promoting social emotional awareness and social emotional learning into their classrooms, but I have to model it so they can see it and feel it. So what I want to do now is spend time, one, answering any questions, but then talking to you all about the things that I do in my classroom to make a difference with my students. So the biggest thing is building positive relationships with my students. This is huge to me, and it's so interesting. Some of the things that I do, I feel like aren't that big of a deal, and it doesn't take me any time. But the number of notes and emails, my students telling me, wow, thank you so much, Dr. Zolkowski. That really made a difference. And we're just like, okay, well, it's a big deal. You have to show your students that you care. And you're thinking, okay, well, I teach 100 and something students. How do I possibly do that? Well, one of the things is creating those meaningful and engaging lessons and being organized. That seems pretty simple, but it's a game changer. They thrive off of structure. They need to know where to go to get the information when they need to get it, being consistent with it, having multiple modes of getting the ideas across. So in my face-to-face class, I will specifically model and tell my students what my expectations are, but I also have all that information on Canvas for them to see. For my online students, I create a video where I basically walk through how to complete the assignment and what the expectations are, because I recognize that some students, they can't just read it, they need to hear it too. And so I will create, it's not long, sometimes it's a little longer than others depending on the assignment. But me creating a video and sharing my screen and walking through everything and talking to them like I'm talking to you all now, makes a difference because they know what my expectations are. And it's like I'm in the classroom, like we would be in a regular classroom. They need to feel like we're available to them. So what works for your schedule is great. And as long as your students know that you're going to be available during those times, for me, I tell my students, I will respond to you within 24 hours. And I'm always consistent on 24 hours. Now, I don't know what everyone else's schedules are like, but our students at UT Tyler, a lot of them work full-time jobs, they have families, and the time for them to do their homework is on the weekends. So I do respond to my students on the weekend because that's their time to get their work done. And it's just something small that I can do to respond to an email quickly. So I always tell them that within 24 hours. Now, if your thing is I don't respond on the weekend, then make sure that your students know that, and that there are times when you are available that you're available to them. Talk about yourself. I will share, much like I did with you all in sharing the pictures of my kids. I will share pictures. I love yard blow-ups, y'all. Christmas blow-ups. We have, I'm pretty sure that we're on people's Christmas cards because, when we came back from Thanksgiving, there were people in our yard taking pictures next to blow-ups. So I have Halloween blow-ups. If I could have a blow-up for every season, I would. But so I'll show them pictures of that or show pictures of my animals. My daughter Zoe created, this is kind of priceless. My daughter, she said, Mom, I'm going to create a video to tell your students what we want. And it was all about incentives and consequences. And she created her own PowerPoint presentation, and it was precious. And she even did it twice. She recorded the video twice, and I showed my students, and they were like, oh my gosh, that was so awesome, and we want to hear from her more. So I will share pictures and talk about myself, and I cannot even describe to you the number of times, even on my end of semester evaluations, how my students say, I really appreciate you sharing your life with us. It isn't anything big. It's just something short and small and very easy to do, but they see me as a real person. And so that has been something like, okay, well, that wasn't that hard, but okay, I'm going to keep doing it because you keep telling me that you I think this because they really just love me being obsessed with my kids and my yard blow-ups. So another one for me is learning their names and how to pronounce it. This is another one that you think, well, that's not a big deal. The number of students who commented about that on teachers that don't know who they are versus teachers that do is crazy. And again, it's something simple. So at the beginning of the semester for my in-person classes, I have them write their name on a little card thing, and then I have them smile and take a picture, and I have them stored on my phone, and I literally before class will look at my phone, and I tell them, like, I'm just going to take a picture, not in a creepy way, but I'm just taking a picture so I can learn your names. In an online class, if they have like a flip grid or a way to introduce themselves, I like that, because then I know how to pronounce their name based on what they have said. And then another thing that I do that they really like in my face-to-face class is I ask them questions, a very first class, just, what do you want? What are your expectations and that kind of thing. But then I also ask them, what's your favorite song? And I create a playlist from Spotify of their favorite songs. And so my first PowerPoint slide for every class is the list of the songs that I played. And I like to get to class like maybe 20 minutes or so early so I can set things up. And then I can walk around the room as things are playing and check in with the students, notice things about them, talk to them, and get to know them. That is a way for me to build relationships and show them that I care. So none of these things that I've said are a big deal. They're easy things that I can do, but they make a huge difference. Another thing that I like to do is ask them, what is your stress level? I ask them at the beginning of the semester, and then as we continue on in the semester. I see comments, but I can't see the comments. So when I'm not sharing my screen, I will address the comments. So I hear you, I see you, sort of. I see that
it's a lot of like affirmation, like, yay, that's awesome, great idea.
You want to see my yard blow ups, don't you?
You're on fire, Staci. Keep it up, girl.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So I asked them what their stress level is and what their support, what's their level of support. So if I have a student who has a very high stress level at the beginning of the semester, to me, they're my 911. What can I do? I will reach out to those students. How can I help? What's your level of support? I check in with them as the semester continues. If I have a student that hasn't completed an assignment on time, or whatnot, I always check in. Another thing too is I let them know my expectations and I stick to them. So I don't accept late work, and I will tell them why I don't accept late work. I give them my parameters and I'm empathetic with them, but I'm consistent, I'm structured, I have high expectations of you and myself. And I feel like that shows them that I care about them and their education and their commitment as well as mine. And the other thing that I do at the very beginning of the semester is if my professor only knew, and they could tell me anything. I had one student tell me one time that his girlfriend was pregnant and he hadn't told anybody yet. I like reading books. So sometimes you get something profound and sometimes you just get really nothing, and that's okay. And I tell them that I like to, and I say the same thing to them. You don't have to tell me anything profound. I want you to tell me something about yourself. So some of them have shared about their anxiety and depression, or that school is really hard, or just whatever the case may be. And it just kind of opens my eyes to maybe what their why is. I have check-ins, how are you doing? What's going on? How can I help? This semester, I recognized that their stress level was like a 20 out of 10. So I combined 2 lessons and I had it as a surprise to them. And I just said, we're taking mental health break. And I said, and we talked about, and we'll talk in class about, okay, right now is really stressful. I'll bust out my calendar and I'll say, look at my calendar. This is what I have going on. And I'll model for them. Because as we remember from what we, I've talked about earlier, we don't always have that. It's not always easy for people to be organized with their time or figure things out. So if I can model that for them, then hopefully they will be able to use that and things will be less stressful and they will take that into their classroom for their students. So I told them, I said, I don't want you have one job and your job is to take a picture of yourself doing something and you can sleep. I wanted them to take that 90-minute time. And I said, and I'm not going to have you write anything up about it because that defeats the purpose of a mental health break, because then you're having to do an assignment. So I said, we'll talk about it in class. And, it wasn't on me to know if they did something or they didn't do something for themselves, but the idea that I gave them that time showed them that I cared about them. The email that I got from one particular student was like probably the nicest email that I've ever received. And she knew that I heard her and heard the rest of the class. And it was easy. I didn't really do anything, but acknowledging the suckitude of things sometimes, or just how, you're right, this is hard and you do have a lot going on, and I'm sorry, but I know you can get through it and I'm here to support you in any way that I can. That's it. I don't need anything else. I can in my online classes, I will send out an announcement. I'm just thinking about you. I want you to know that I'm here for you. And I think you guys rock. And I will post a couple of pictures, and then I'll say, feel free to share pictures of what's going on in your life. And several students will, and it's okay if they don't, but they know that I'm there. And even though maybe in an online setting that I'm not physically there, I want them to know that I still support them. And I'll tell them in an online setting, if you need to set up a Zoom, if you need me to talk you off a ledge or support you or do whatever you need me to do, I am here for you. So for me, it's very important that I model to my students what I want them to do for their students. I can't just talk about it. I can't just have them read a book about it. If I'm not doing it in my class, then they're not going to learn how to do it in their class with their students. So ultimately it is, okay, we talk all the time, you've got to give yourself a break. If you don't give yourself a break, you think, oh, I'm just going to power through, you're going to burn out. And think about, all right, well, we can either look at the positives or we can point out the negatives. Which one would you rather do? It's a mind flip, because if you go into schools now, it's negative, 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 negative. You hear very little positive. And so it's like, you got to flip the script. You got to start pointing out the positives. You'll feel that the energy drain out of you if you're only pointing out the negative, but you'll feel the energy go into you and into your students and into your lessons when you're pointing out the positives and you're showing that to your students. So for me, bottom line is I have to model to my students what I want them to be like. And if they feel that I care about them and I value them as people and I value them as future teachers, then in my opinion, I've done my job. And the other thing that we have at UT Tyler is really cool is a mentorship program. And if you don't have this at your university, where you're at in your UT system, I would highly recommend it. We work with the counseling and psychology program, and we have a mentor program. It's called something fancy, but I can't think of it off the top of my head right now. And if it's a group of people, and you can sign up as a faculty member to be a mentor, and if you have a student that is not doing well, or you're just concerned about, you can send their information to the Mentor Center. Oh, that's what it's called, Mentor Center. You can give their information to the Mentor Center, and they will reach out to that student and get them a mentor. But that's something that I can also provide. To me, that's your 911 kids. But I feel for myself, I have a lot less 911 kids because of the things that I've done in my classroom and modeled to them. So I feel like I was just on a roll, and I just spewed all of my guts at you. And now I want you to talk to me. Oh, I don't want to do a new share. I want to stop my share. There we go. Okay. Questions, thoughts?
Thanks, Staci. There is a question Nicole posed. I'd love to think about how we can do this at the institutional level as well, and how can we better support students and make them feel like they belong?
To me, the things that I, just talking to them, acknowledging that it's a hard time goes a long way. Yeah. And hearing them and making adjustments as you need to. And so it seems so simple, but it makes a huge difference. I got a handwritten in cursive letter from one of my male students. I know, it was beautiful. Of course, Thor ate it, the bad dog. But it's the sentiment that counts. And to me, no offense to my male friends out there, but you're winning if you get a handwritten in cursive letter from your male students telling you how much your support meant. So in my mind, I'm not doing anything different. I'm not doing anything special or out of the box, but they feel like it is. And so I think it's really at an institutional level, it is bringing about awareness. I feel like we see that our students in the K-12 schools are like, okay, they're really struggling and whatnot, and they've been through so much, and school is, what does school look like for them? But we're not acknowledging that the teachers, it's the same thing for our teachers. And for our students, it's the same thing. This year at UT Tyler, for some of our students, this is their first semester where they're in schools. They are taking in-person classes and online classes, and they're working. So this is their first real semester, and they were drowning. And I think it's because they were not acknowledging that navigating a pandemic is not for the faint of heart. It's hard, and all the emotions that go along with that. And so I think it's weird, but it's the acknowledgement, and is the best thing that you can do. And then modeling for them strategies that you do. So it's like, what do you do when you are, what do you do when you need a break? Do you need to sleep? Do you want to go on a walk? What is it that you do? How can you support yourself? Because that matters. Let's talk about to-do lists. Let's make a to-do list. This is what I do when I am, for their exam. I said, this is how I study this is what I would do for my exam. It's so simple. I would go to the module on that topic, and I would read the PowerPoint presentation and look at my notes. So easy, but it isn't for everyone. Or, okay, well, you probably shouldn't start doing all of your work on a big project on Saturday. let's think about spending an hour. And I tell them, my daughter was 3 months old and my son was not even 2 when I started doc school full time. And so I showed them, like, I had a notebook, and I would block out every single assignment. I say, okay, I'm going to read this on this day. I'm going to spend an hour on this subject and an hour on this subject and an hour on this subject. And I would talk to them about that process so that they could see you don't have to just finish it all right now. It's okay to do it bit by bit. So talking to them about them, giving them those strategies, helps them. You're still going to have those people that are like my husband. Is like, I love the pressure, bring on the pressure. And I'm like, no, I'm proactive, positive Pollyanna. Let's do it bit by bit. And just talking to them and working through it, and then coming from a place of empathy. Empathy goes a long way. I'm really, really sorry that happened, or that you didn't give yourself enough time. What can you do for next time? And it's decisions that they make that it's not on us. We can feel bad for a scenario, but it doesn't mean that it's anything that we did wrong. So staying consistent, having that structure, it makes a difference, but always coming with empathy, and then ultimately being encouraging to them.
So Staci, I'm really struck at, and I know you well. I mean, I work with Staci.
I'm obsessed with Anna, y'all.
I'm totally obsessed with her, and you can see why. Now you understand why. So what I'm really struck with is just how you are so open. I mean, I think I'm listening to all of this and sort of doing a scan sort of across my own heart as I'm listening to this. And I'm thinking, am I, I know I'm vulnerable, but am I willing to share it in the same way? And can I have fun with my own vulnerability, which is sort of another level of vulnerability? So I find that it really, I feel like this is sort of a question that we have to be courageously vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I will, for me, just sharing a couple of pictures or whatnot isn't a huge big deal. I'm not divulging like my deepest, darkest secrets. I'll tell funny stories. I had one about Colton and this whole frontal lobe situation that we're going through right now. My mom, they're making pasta, and my mom was like, now smack the flour down onto the counter, and he heard smack, and that boy, sure enough, smacked that flour, and then flour goes everywhere. And so just some of those kinds of things, or I'll share things that I, used to do in the classroom, or mistakes that I've made, and they just see us as real people, and they need to see us as real. We know we're real people. I'm like, I am not a big deal, and I'll say I'm such a big deal, and I'm like, no, I'm really not, and they need to see that they see us as this untouchable thing, right? Think about when you were in the classroom. Think about when you had teachers, whether you were in K-12 setting or when you had a professor. You think they're a big deal, and so we just need to show them that we're somebody other than a professor. So take baby steps, baby steps into whatever the case may be. Show your turtle first, and then or whatever it is that you have, your plant.
Well, just one thought. So I actually feel like that's helpful. And maybe that's an internal document for us, like how to, we're here because we want to be, and we care about teachers intensely. And we want to do better is why we're here. And we do research about teaching and teachers. We love the profession. We are distressed by their distress. And like maybe a handbook on, how scaredy cat teacher educators can be a little more courageously vulnerable.
Yeah.
So plants, I need that. I need that.
Yeah, plant. I mean, come on.
They have a little checkbox.
Yeah, I mean, my students, I love shoes. And so I'm always busting out in a cool pair of shoes. And so they'll make a comment about my shoes. And then that drives me to the next time, what shoes should I wear today? Because it matters to them. I had a student, because I showed a picture of my yard blow-ups, and I had a student send me a picture of this, like, I kind of want it. I just really need my husband to buy this for me. It's probably a blow up that would be at like a car dealership. It's like the biggest Santa Claus you've ever seen, and it would be taller than her house. But the student she's like, I saw this and I thought about you and I thought you would love it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need this in my life. I had another student. This is something, again, super duper simple. They're in the phase that I'm teaching, that are my pre-service teachers, they are taking their content test. And it's a big deal. You all know, shaking your head, it's a big deal. And they're slightly terrified about that. And I had a student that she came in, and I do oral exams, which is a whole nother thing. And she was talking to me about it. And she said, and I passed it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. And she said, you're the first person that showed me excitement about that. Like, okay, so we need to, another student said, I'm going to be taking my content test on, the next day. I said, you have to tell me how you did. And so sure enough, he emailed me, and I got to send him oh my gosh, I knew you could do it. I'm so proud of you. Congratulations. And so it's just those little things. Show your plants, or if you have coffee mugs, whatever the case may be, that's something that you love, that you can show to your students, and be empathetic, and just remember, just like all of us, I mean, we've all been through this same pandemic, and it's not easy. We've all lost people. We've all struggled. There's a lot of entities to this, and we have to acknowledge that for ourselves as well.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. I'm super excited about continuing the discussion in January. We will we're going to bring some examples in January about how we can bring this and really take this great work that you've done, and how can we make it accessible to practitioners so that we can begin to spread the word and the light and the passion around hope, and actual steps you can do to help generate that within your own students, to create more resilient teachers. So I'm excited about continuing this work, continuing the discussion in January. Thanks to each of you for joining us. And Staci, let's connect in the next couple of days so we can talk about next steps if you're interested. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to get to talk to all of you. I greatly appreciate this time with all of you today.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Bye.
And thanks, Dr. Haddad, also for your comments.